welcome to today's webinar. No snow here in Jyväskylä yet, but it's a chilly -2 Celsius today and a big full moon on the sky. And also, if we have any American listeners tuning in this morning, happy Thanksgiving to you guys. Today's topic is trading with the body in mind, the physiology of trading, decision making and performance. We'll hear about the busy world of trading and the importance of stress management, sleep and resilience for good performance. I'm Tina Hoffman from Firstbeat and I'll be hosting the webinar today, and our guest Steve Ward will be joining us from London. A couple of practical matters first. We will be lasting the webinar about 30 minutes, and during the webinar, if you have some questions, you can write them in the chat window, and after the presentation we can read out the questions for Steve to answer. If you run out of time for all the questions, then we will send the answers to you via email afterwards. But now I'm happy to introduce today's guest, Steve Ward from Performance Edge Consulting based in the UK. Steve has years of experience working with traders and high performers around the world. He's helped them improve their performance and decision making. His work draws on performance psychology, neuroscience, stress physiology, mindfulness-based strategies, and high performance coaching. Steve's also previously provided psychological coaching for elite athletes and sports teams, and he is the author of High Performance Trading, Trader Mind, and Sports Betting to Win. Steve utilizes Firstbeat Lifestyle Assessment as part of his portfolio, and he will actually share a few examples of that. But if you want to learn more about details about lifestyle assessment, you can check the Firstbeat website or get in touch with us here at Firstbeat or with Steve directly. But now let's let Steve get started. So welcome, Steve, and it's all yours.
Tina, and hello everybody. Good to be here to talk to you really a bit about, I guess, trading, about decision making, which is the core of what traders are doing, and the impact that their physiology has on that, in combination with their psychology as well. So Tina's done a great job of an introduction, so I won't add much more to that, other than to say really that I've spent about 25 years now working in performance psychology and performance enhancement. The last 15 years of that pretty much in the world of trading and investing. So typical clients are banks, hedge funds, investment managers, energy trading companies, utilities, commodities trading companies, and what we call prop trading firms. So groups of traders trading their own capital all over the globe, trading a very wide variety of different instruments, all with their own unique challenges. But for all those populations, the core of that is decision making. And I also was lucky enough to get a chance to do some work in professional poker. Again, very interesting world, where again at the core of that is making decisions with this element of risk and uncertainty. So it's a great kind of laboratory to be able to work in. We haven't got obviously a huge amount of time today. It's probably a topic I could talk for 3, 4, 5 days, or maybe even more. So we've got 30 minutes. I want to try and give you, I guess, an insight into some of the work that I've been doing, probably particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, where thanks to things like Firstbeat, we're able to really look at the physiology of start with really a chance just to think about what are traders doing day to day. What are some of the kind of key challenges they're facing? What factors affect their market returns? Then we'll specifically look at today the impact that physiology has on decision making. In the world of trading, there's been an increasing interest in the psychology of decision making. There's not been as much work or as much interest in the physiology, but as we'll see, those two are very closely linked together. I'll then share with you just a few case studies, a few examples of some of the Firstbeat lifestyle assessments that I've done with some of my clients. I've done hundreds of these now with different traders all over the globe, but I've got 4 kind of very different ones to show you from different parts of trading, which I think you'll find pretty interesting. And then I'll talk briefly at the end really about some of the strategies and tactics that I might typically use to help my clients. So I want to start really with getting you just to do a little bit of thinking, and I'd like you to imagine that you've just been given $1,000 and then you've got a choice. And what happens is we're going to toss a coin, and you can decide whether it's heads or tails. If you call correctly, then you double your money. So you now have $2. But if you call incorrectly, you end up with nothing. So your choice really is you can keep that $1,000 and that's yours to keep, or you can take a risk and try and double your money. But if you're incorrect, you would lose your money. Now, I just want you to imagine you've physically got that money in your hands. So someone's actually giving you that $1,000. It's there in your hands. And just think, and be as honest if you can, if you were asked that question to keep the $1,000 or to toss the coin, what would you do in that situation? And just keep a note of your answer. And then I want you to think about a second situation where you have to pay somebody $1,000, or you have the choice of tossing the coin, and if you are correct in calling the coin, then you give nothing, so you lose nothing. But if you're wrong, you have to give over $2,000. So you can either accept upfront the $1,000 loss, or you can toss a coin and decide what you would do. Now, what's interesting is we're looking at two scenarios which are a really key part of trading. So as you can see there from the bottom, the research findings show that in part one, 84% of people asked this question go for keeping the $1,000. So just think about what you said for yourself. In the second one, 70% of people here will take the risk. And it's interesting because in trading, one of the, I guess, the golden rules, one of the core concepts is around if you're making money on a trade, if you're in profit, it's about letting that profit run. Whilst if you're in a losing situation, it's about being able to take those losses. Essentially, in very simple business terms, you want to make more money than you're losing. And it seems conceptually very simple. And everybody kind of understands that, yes, you need to make more than you're losing. So you need to make sure you are running those profits and cutting those losses. However, the data and the real life observations of traders show that that actually is very difficult. Many traders do exactly the opposite. They take their profits quickly and they are more willing to take a risk on the downside. And that's what we're seeing here really, is that in situations of gain, many people become risk averse, whilst in situations of losing, they become more risk seeking. And that behavior really is anti what's required to be a good trader. And this is really just a very quick, simple to illustrate the challenge that traders have. There's a kind of a well-known saying in trading that trading is simple, but it's not easy. There's a lot of kind of core concepts that people understand, but the execution of those concepts is difficult and challenging, very largely of the environment that traders have to operate within. So the trader's sitting at his screen, multiple screens, and they're also getting information flow coming in. They have to observe all that information, both visually. They'll be getting information coming in from audio as well. They've done some reading and research in advance. And then they have to make sense of that information, so the orientation phase. And as they orientate that information, they then also be making decisions and they're taking action. So they're in a kind of a loop. That loop could take a while to go through for a longer time frame trader. For some traders, their trades are made in split seconds, and that'll be a very high speed loop. But the basic component interesting is around all of that is what we call decision environment. Now in trading, it's quite unique because the trader is making those decisions where they are also having to take a risk, where there are large elements of uncertainty and ambiguity, where there is often novelty, where the consequences of each decision can be quite considerable, often with short time frames, with incomplete information, and in environments where there's a very strong results focus. And that is a very challenging environment to make decisions in. So they then have to, within that environment, orientate, make sense of what's going on with all that going on around them. And so it means things like their skills, their knowledge, their strategy, past experiences, the physical environment. That's all going to be a part of the orientation. But then we've got the internal processes. You know, as traders process information, a level of stress will impact what they see, how they see it, the speed of that. and so on, as will their mindset, as will the emotions that are present in those moments. Where they're focused will impact the decisions they make. The amount of energy in the body will impact that. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on for traders from moment to moment, which impacts how, or even what they notice, what they observe, and how they then orientate that in this very challenging environment. It makes it very challenging for the trader. It makes it fascinating for people like myself to get to work with them. So what I want to kind of do really is focus today. There's a lot of stuff going on for traders, and actually coaching traders and coaching decision making in these environments is quite complex. But I want us today to take one component part, which is physiology. So in that orientation phase, I know from experience and from some research we've done that there is a strong part of that phase, which let's call it the stress response, and that can be both, let's say, fear or excitement, so kind of positive or negative, has a big impact on that orientation of data and information, as does physical energy. So we look at the physiology today of what's happening in that orientation phase, a few insights into that, and I say then we'll look at a few case studies. But, that's the basic model just to kind of keep in our mind. So let's start really by thinking about the impact of stress on trading decision making. Now, for traders and fund managers, there are many causes of stress. There's the stress of losing money. There can be stress from making mistakes. There can be stress, actually very high stress, from missing out on an opportunity. There can be stress from the size of the risk that people are taking, uncertainty, novelty. These are all stressors. When the market is more volatile, kind of moving more faster and erratically, that can be stressful. And actually, another form of stress for traders and fund managers, probably more recent, is what we might call career stress or career risk. Which is, if I get this wrong or I don't perform, will I lose my job? What's the impact there? So, and all of that can be occurring at the same time. What's critical around the orientation of data and the decision making is that as the stress response is kicking in, there's a reduction in blood flow from the prefrontal cortex, from the higher levels in the brain, which for traders is critical around decision making, around long-term focus, and also in trading there's a lot of talk around what we would call discipline. So the ability to have your trading process, have your decision making process, and to be able to stick to that. And what lots of traders do, for different reasons, both psychological and physiological, is they drift away from that process, making suboptimal decisions. And when the stress response is higher than is normal for the trader, we see this process cortical inhibition, where the blood flow is coming away from that prefrontal cortex, which is key to decision making and importantly key to self-control and willpower, we would frame in trading as discipline. So it has a really big impact. It also makes traders thinking very short term. It's emotion driven. The thinking is less deliberate, so there are a number of decision making biases which are amplified in that state. So being able to manage the stress response, both being resilient to it and being able to manage it in the moment, are key skills for my trading clients. We can then look at, I guess, a part of the energy factor behind trading. This is a graph here that came from a study looking at parole decision making, 1,200 studies or samples in the study. Vertically, percentage chance of being paroled. Horizontally, we've got the time of day. And it basically shows there's a significant variation in your chance of being paroled, not just on your crime or your sentence length, but significantly just based on the time of day that you went in front of the parole board. And in this study, what was interesting was they found that the decision to keep people in versus the decision to let people out was twice as quick. So the parole board took a lot more time to think about the decision to let people out, whether you were assuming the risk. And because of the time and the consequences involved in that decision, there was a greater utilization of brain fuel in this model here, glucose. And as glucose basically lowered the brain, what happened was the brain realized it's getting low in glucose, it's still going to make decisions, it switches into cognitive ease, kind of a very highly efficient mode, low energy. And so given the choice of a quick decision versus a harder one, it defaults to the quicker, simpler one, in this case, keeping people in. So we see that bias coming through as a function, not of a psychological process, but of a physiological process. And in the research, I guess the findings were the importance of glucose, so energy to the brain, and then also rest and recovery. So physiological factors, which is really interesting. Fatigue in general, from my experience and research with traders, is in general a big factor. When people are tired, they don't tend to make their best decisions. And actually, it's interesting, not too long ago, there was a good bit of research done with gamblers, not with traders, in casinos, but look at the impact of sleep on gambling behavior. And what was significant here was that people who were sleep deprived, there was an impact on their financial decision making, where people were a bit more overly focused on gains and reward, and at the same time were paying less attention to the impact of losses. Now, in trading, being very controlled and focused on your losses is critical. So risk management, as we would define it, is a key trading function, and that deteriorates under sleep deprivation. So again, it's an interesting study because it's shown physiological impact on risk reward behavior. So I guess what I try to do with my trading clients and my fund managers and my investing clients is to make them aware of the embodied brain. You know, that they are essentially cognitive athletes. That's how I would view them. The brain is the key resource. The brain isn't just in the brain. The brain is split through the nervous system, in the heart and the gut as well. So it's kind of a whole body process. But being aware of the mind-body connection is really important. A lot of people are still kind of stuck with this notion of a mind-body split. We know that's not the case. When people are taking decisions around risk and reward, it is a whole body process. And what that means is actually, and as we've seen already very briefly, is that physiology matters. And I, in very simple terms, look at the stress response and the nervous system, and then factors around kind of energy management and fatigue as kind of the two big building blocks of that. And so with my clients, you know, almost, I guess, at a foundational level, underneath the underpinning psychology and the performance behaviors is the need to maintain a, as good a physiology as is possible. How can we build resiliency? How do you manage stress in the moment? How do you ensure there's sufficient energy for the body, and likewise then for the brain? And so what I want to do next is really just show you 4 real life examples of 4 different traders in 4 different environments, but share with you some of the Firstbeat data that we've got, so you can kind of, I guess, get a feel for what it's like. I'll try and give a bit of a case history to each of them, and then we'll finish off by looking at, kind of some of the tools, techniques that we can use that we help these people with, and that I use in general. The first trader is a portfolio manager. Is working in an investment firm, so in sort of a medium to longer time frame type horizon. Assuming that most of you are relatively familiar with the Firstbeat information, I won't go into too much detail, but in very simple terms, if you're not, the red bars are showing the stress response, could be positive or negative. The green bars are recovery, and then obviously the blue bars here is our physical activity and movement. So some striking things straight away for this particular client in terms of, obviously, there's lots of red during the day. That's very common for most of my clients, so they are on. If you think about red as being on, green as being off, they're on for large amounts of the time. We can see that in the sleep period, it's very short, 5 hours, 40 minutes. It starts off predominantly red, it only goes green later on. If you look at the stress and recovery data and the sleep data, we can see there's lots of reds and oranges. There's no minutes of recovery during the working day. So this is, not uncommon in my client, yet also obviously it's not a particularly useful state. So if you think about performance as having 2 key dimensions, capability and capacity, this is a highly capable person, very good skills, very good knowledge, very good strategies. However, in this state, is just not able to make their best decisions. So highly capable, but low in capacity. So fatigued, very stressed, young family at home. So again, remembering that stress isn't just from trading, it's also coming from all other areas as well. And here, particularly for this client, the main focus for us was this lack of recovery, both intraday, so within the day, lack of recovery, good quality during the sleep period, but also for this person, a lack of really good recovery, periodic over the course of the year. So not a lot of holiday taken, and when it was actually often was working during the holiday period. So interesting. This person's data we took probably about 2 years ago, and we've managed to make some quite significant impact and positive change for this client. So an interesting one. The next person's a trader in a bank, also a manager of traders. So kind of two causes of stress really. One is their own trading, and one is managing other traders, which is very unique and challenging. Again, we can see the huge amounts during the course of the day of stress here. Very long working day, so 11 hours. In fact, if I flick back a slide, we can see here for the portfolio manager, it's 11 hours and 45 the working day. So these are long working days, very stressful all the way through. Again, we can see the sleep is interrupted. It's not great quality. There was a small amount of alcohol for this client on this particular day. That probably had an impact as well. Again, we can see the stress recovery data is recovery at 11%, so very, very low. Again, no minutes of recovery during the working day. Length of sleep, 7 hours, and a minute, so we're just, I guess, over that threshold. But again, the amount of recovery, quality of recovery is very, very low. So, but this was a person with multiple challenges, the trading, the managing of traders in a bank where there's been lots of regulation and restructuring, redundancies, going through a big cultural change program. So even with, if you take out just the trading side of it, there's often multiple layers to where this stress is coming from and where the fatigue is arising from. So again, an interesting person to work with. Again, some simple changes we put in place. We managed to make some positive changes. The next person from a hedge fund. Again, we can see it's a very long working day. It's 11 hours. It's predominantly stressful throughout. There are elements here, though, of recovery during the day. It amounts to 7 minutes, so still not a lot, but it's higher than our previous two clients. This is an interesting person because, again, very capable, but a challenging time in their trading. So under a lot of performance pressure and stress, and we can see that coming through. Very active mind, finding it hard to kind of settle down in the evenings, worrying a lot about work. Again, we can see the sleep, 7 hours 45 in terms of the quantity, but again, we see the quality obviously is very low in here. So yeah, again, not uncommon. Trading has many highs, has many lows. The lows physiologically can be very, very challenging. Now, the fourth trader is someone trading for an energy company. And what you'll notice here is the day is slightly shorter, so it's 9.5 hours. Still lots of red, although there are obviously some bits of green in there as well. But you can see here, this is the pre-sleep period, the sleep period itself. There's lots of green bars, so lots of recovery. We can see that during the day, there's 30 minutes of recovery time, even though the working day is shorter. So percentage-wise, much higher. Sleep quantity, quality, all good. In fact, this person's whole lifestyle was very good. And I picked this person on as an example to share, often because a highly capable person, but with a particular focus on what I would call kind of good performance lifestyle habits. So a really strong awareness of the importance of sleep. Not that sleep, that we just need to get the 7 to 8 hours, because we do, but actually that sleep as a performance enhancer. The importance of exercise and physical activity as a performance enhancer, the importance of nutrition as a performance enhancer, the importance of recovery as a performance enhancer. So a person with a very performance-focused mindset and a real commitment to creating that lifestyle which supports and underpins good trading. And it really just shows that it's possible. And it is really about, I think, knowledge of some of the habits and behaviours. Then it's a commitment to them, which is really key. So this is really somebody with high capability and high capacity. So therefore, performing close to potential. Just before we get into some of the strategies and tactics, I want to share this quote. A client I was working with gave me a book to read, and this kind of bit was highlighted. And it's a quote from a book from the 1940s, book called How to Trade in Stocks, called Jesse Livermore, very successful. But it essentially, you know, talked about keeping stress at bay. You can see there it talked about physical life, going to bed early, eating, drinking lightly, taking exercise, standing upright. So they're kind of all habits that we would all agree today would be good, you know, physiological habits to develop for health and well-being as much as for performance. So nothing really new. You know, people knew this all those years ago in the trading and investing world. And people have intuitively known it for, you know, all the time since then. But I think what the Firstbeat data has allowed for me is to let people see the impact of your behavior on your physiology, and then to see the impact of your physiology on your decision making. But once people see the chart, the data, it really brings that to life. And so when we then talk about strategies and tactics, it becomes much easier for them to, I guess, commit to, experiment with, and try them out. So I basically have kind of 3 levels that I try and help people with. The first one, which I think is that awareness of your physiology. A lot of people can intuitively work out, have I slept well, am I fit, am I healthy, is my diet good, in quite a vague way. The data, I think, is much more compelling. So in my own work, I utilize a lot of monitoring using heart rate variability. I use the Firstbeat Lifestyle Assessment as my kind of core go-to platform for measuring physiology, often using the 3-day process, 2 working days and a weekend day, and then teach a lot of skills around interoception, which is basically the ability of the brain to read the signals from the body, and then what we call self-calibration skills, so being able to notice in yourself, developing the skills to be aware of, you know, what is my stress level right now, what's my energy level right now, but in quite a fine-tuned way. And actually interoception, as that improves, it's a trainable skill, actually is very strongly linked then to the ability to self-calibrate. So, and for example, we might do things like, for mindfulness, things like the body scan can be a really useful way of teaching that kind of training. Interestingly, a guy called John Coates, who's done some research with traders, found that in a hedge fund, found that interoception, so that ability to read your body signals, had a correlation to a trader's profitability and also to a trader's lifespan, success over time. Pretty interesting stuff. We then talk about what I call the performance levers. So these are kind of the physiological foundations for me of performance. So talk about strategies for getting good sleep. And interestingly, a lot of people just don't have awareness of the importance of quality of sleep. Everyone's kind of hooked into quantity, but most of the clients that I work with have no real idea about the quality I mentioned and the factors that affect that. So that's always interesting for them. Recovery, strategic, how do we get it during the day? How do we get it in the evenings, weekends, and then periodic over time? The importance of physical activity, and then the importance of nutrition, particularly around blood sugar stability, and making sure the brain's got the fuel available to make decisions as we need to. And then the third component really is what I would call kind of conditioning and regulating, which is essentially, I guess, it's the training, it's the mental, emotional, physiological kind of training programs. So I utilize quite a biofeedback-based training, which is good because that improves interoception as well, makes them more in tune with their physiology, and we also shift the physiology through biofeedback-based techniques. I utilize a lot of mindfulness and meditation-based and type strategies and approaches, which also have obviously good impact on our nervous system, on the stress response, as well as our emotional regulation, interoceptive awareness, and so on. And then obviously a very wide part of my work is a broad toolkit around how to manage stress, how to develop resiliency, how we can regulate the stress response and emotions in real time. And it's really giving people the tools, the awareness of the impact of their physiology, and then really some kind of very practical tools, tips, techniques that they can utilize both over time and in the moment to then build that resiliency, to sustain energy, you know, kind of build impact to fatigue and so on. But cool. So I think that's probably a good 25-minute whiz through. I appreciate it is probably pretty fast, but if there are any questions or anything people would like to ask, I think now's probably a time when we can do that. We've still got a few minutes spare.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Really interesting view into very stressful world, and a good reminder too that even if we cannot eliminate, most of us cannot eliminate stress, but there is certainly a big room for coaching in the area of lifestyle and recovery and sleep. So clearly, I'm sure you have your work cut out for you, and there is plenty for the rest of us as well in this area. But yeah, let's see. I don't see any questions. If you have any questions in the chat right now, looks like some people are writing, so let's give it just a minute and then I can read it out from here. Yeah, there's a question here about the great presentation. Can you talk about the longitudinal part of your work? Probably looking like follow-up kind of thing. So do you have some comment on that?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, Jim, to be honest, what Jim would like there. So Jim, maybe if you just clarify what you're after, and I would definitely talk about it. I'm just trying to understand more about what you'd like to know, really.
Okay, and there's another question here. Do you have some examples of measurable improvements in physiology of your clients after you use the techniques that you mentioned? So what, where have you actually seen some improvements with them?
Yeah, so definitely so there's a couple of things that we do, or I have done. So first of all, when we look at traders' physiology, we will most of the time do a pre and post assessment. So we'll do the 3-day Firstbeat assessment as a pre, get a snapshot. Then we'll get a 3-day, or we'll do a period of kind of behavior change. So we'll implement some changes for 6 to 8 weeks, and then we'll do a post, and we'll look at obviously the pre and post, and where the traders have committed to the process, which they do much more when it's Firstbeat driven than when it's just kind of more casual behavior change stuff. Then yes, we see quite significant changes in their physiology. I've also got a lot of work we've done, research studies using Firstbeat alongside other measures of heart rate variability. And in those, again, we can see, so we can track, we've tracked traders when they've done maybe a period of mindfulness training and HRV over time. We've done studies where we've looked at traders using different tools and techniques under different kind of levels of market stress, and then kind of what tools and techniques have been valuable and the impact they get on HRV. So having that HRV data has been helpful in terms of looking at, what's the impact of trading stress on the trader, and also what's the impact then when we teach them tools or techniques to kind of mitigate that. So yeah, there's quite a lot of that actually around. And I'm currently writing my 4th book, and I'm hoping to put quite a lot of that kind of work into that book. So it'll be out there probably sometime next year.
Okay, and I think it looks like Jim's question kind of went into that as well, looking at the client engagement, what happens from the bench line and with the improvement. So it sounds like you're seeing both physiological and also personal. I mean, subjectively, people feel like they are making improvements, but you're also seeing physiological changes in, for example, their heart rate variability.
Yeah, and I think the key thing that people really hone in on to, because often for most of my clients, the sleep is substandard, it's suboptimal, and people see that, and I think it makes them really focus in on their sleep and recovery pattern. I would say for 90% of my clients, the core focus after Firstbeat is improving sleep quality and strategic recovery. And then probably for the other 10%, and maybe a bit of overlap, is a lot of people think they're physically active, but the Firstbeat data shows they're not active enough to get health benefits. And so a lot of people actually up their the intensity or the frequency of their physical activity in order to meet those health. Half the people who do the studies think they are kind of pretty healthy, and the Firstbeat data would say that most of them actually are probably not.
Okay, great. Good questions and good discussion. And I'll look through. If we have a few more questions we didn't answer right now, we can answer them later via email. But I think that's our time is up now, and the podcast of today's webinar will be available on the website in a couple of days. And like Steve mentioned, if you have questions to Steve directly, you can get in touch with him via his email here on the slide, or you can get in contact with us here at Firstbeat. So it looks like starting to cut out on the audio line a little bit, so it's good time to end the day. But thank you, Steve. Very interesting, good presentation. And Stay tuned to our next webinars coming out. At least in January, we'll have another one coming up. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.